The way he looks at him, Xiao Zhan's loving stare at Wang Yibo becomes the photo of the year. The photograph appeared online just after midnight. No flashy filters. No dramatic angles. Just a single, unguarded moment, Xiao Zhan standing under the stage lights, his gaze locked on Wang Yibo with a softness so profound it seemed to quiet the entire world. At first, the image spread quietly among fan pages, captioned with whispers like, "Did you see the way he looks at him?" But within hours, it was everywhere. By morning, news outlets were calling it the photo of the year. And yet, for those who followed their story, the rooftop promise, the protective embrace, the moonlit boat ride, this moment felt like the inevitable crescendo. This was not just another photo. It was a confession without words. Earlier that evening, the concert hall had been a roaring storm of light and sound. Fans waved banners high, screaming lyrics through tears of joy. Wang Yibo had been his usual enigmatic self, sharp, charismatic, holding the stage with effortless confidence. Xiao Zhan, glowing in a tailored suit, seemed carved from starlight. But in the quiet between songs, when the lights dimmed just enough, something happened. Yibo turned to adjust his mic. The crowd roared. And Xiao Zhan paused. His expression softened, the tension in his shoulders melted away, and in that split second, he looked at Wang Yibo as if nothing else existed. The cameras didn't catch it on purpose, they were aimed at the stage, but a fan in the front row snapped the moment. The flash froze the gaze forever. Awe, tenderness, longing. Backstage after the show, Xiao Zhan scrolled through his phone, unaware the photo had already gone viral. He was laughing at something Tan Songyun had said when Yibo walked in, hair damp from a quick rinse, still wearing his stage pants and an oversized hoodie. "You were quiet during the break," Yibo said, leaning casually against the doorframe. Xiao Zhan smirked faintly, brushing hair from his eyes. "Just tired. It's been a long night." But Yibo didn't look convinced. He stepped closer, the air between them charged. "You looked at me like," he stopped himself, a faint color rising in his cheeks. "Like what?" Xiao Zhan asked, voice barely above a whisper. Before Yibo could answer, Tan Songyun called from across the room, breaking the moment. But the way Yibo's eyes lingered told Xiao Zhan everything. By sunrise, hashtags like #the way he looks at him and #Xiaozhan Wang Yibo were trending worldwide. Fans were pairing the photo with clips from previous events, Yibo draping a jacket over Zhan's shoulders in the park, Zhan laughing during their midnight boat ride, Yibo's arm around Zhan's waist during that chaotic onstage moment. Each scene was now part of a larger narrative, the story of two souls who couldn't hide what their eyes had already confessed. In a quiet cafe hours later, the trio Yibo, Zhan, and Songyun hid from the cameras. Tan scrolled through her phone, reading fan captions aloud with a mischievous grin. "The way he looks at him could end wars." She snorted softly. "Find someone who looks at you like Xiao Zhan looks at Wang Yibo." Zhan groaned and covered his face, but his ears burned bright red. Yibo chuckled quietly, though there was a softness in his eyes he couldn't quite hide. "You know they're right," Songyun teased. "That stare of yours, it's something." Zhan looked up, caught Yibo's gaze across the table, and for a moment, the whole cafe seemed to disappear again. Later that afternoon, their manager tried to downplay the frenzy. "It's just a photo," he said. "People will forget." But neither Yibo nor Zhan believed that. The image wasn't just a photo, it was the culmination of everything they'd been trying not to say. It was the whispered "I'll catch you on a rooftop," the shared silence on a hill overlooking the city, the pinky swear under stage lights. That night, unable to sleep, Yibo stood by the hotel window, scrolling through post after post. He stopped on one caption, "Sometimes love isn't spoken. It's in a glance that holds a universe." He glanced at Xiao Zhan asleep on the couch, the soft light painting shadows on his face. And Yibo realized the world had finally seen what he'd been silently carrying for years. 2 days later, during a rehearsal, the atmosphere was buzzing with suppressed energy. The photo had sparked media speculation, but neither Yibo nor Zhan addressed it publicly. They didn't need to. On stage, their glances said everything. During a break, Tan Songyun watched them from the wings. She noticed how Yibo's hand brushed Zhan's as he passed him a water bottle. How Zhan's laughter lingered a little too long when Yibo teased him. The world might have called it friendship, but she knew better. She snapped a candid photo of them, Yibo mid-laugh, Zhan looking at him with that same, devastating softness. She didn't post it. Some moments, she thought, deserved to stay theirs. As the tour moved on, fans started showing up with banners quoting the caption that had gone viral: "Find someone who looks at you like Xiao Zhan looks at Wang Yibo." At one stop, someone even held up a hand-painted sign, "The look that shook the world." During the encore that night, Yibo turned toward Zhan just as the lights flared behind them. And again, without meaning to, without guarding himself, Xiao Zhan looked at him with that same unfiltered tenderness. The crowd screamed, knowing they just witnessed lightning strike twice. By the end of the month, the photo had won viral image of the year in several entertainment polls. Editorials praised it as a reminder that love, platonic or romantic, still exists in its purest form. Some skeptics called it overblown. But those who had seen the look with their own eyes knew it was real. Back in their hotel room after the final show, Zhan sat cross-legged on the bed, scrolling through yet another article analyzing the photo. "They're going to be talking about this forever," he said, half exasperated, half amused. Yibo, leaning against the wall, tilted his head thoughtfully. "Maybe that's okay." Zhan looked up. "You don't mind?" "No," Yibo replied softly. "Because for once, they're seeing the truth." Their eyes met across the room, the air thick with the weight of unspoken words. Zhan's breath caught, and for a moment, it felt like the world outside had stopped spinning. Weeks later, long after the headlines had faded, a fan posted a side-by-side edit. On one side, the viral photo of Zhan's loving stare. On the other, a candid shot from years before, a younger Yibo looking at Zhan with the same quiet devotion. The caption read, "Some stories are written in glances." Xiao Zhan stumbled across it late one night. He saved the image to his phone without thinking. When Yibo found it in his gallery weeks later, he only smiled. Because they both knew, sometimes, the smallest, most silent moments are the ones that echo the loudest. The next morning, their quiet world unraveled further. The photo wasn't just trending, it had crossed into mainstream news. Fashion blogs framed it as a lesson in unspoken chemistry. Music analysts speculated about a secret collaboration. Even unrelated TV shows used it in their slideshows about moments that broke the internet. In a rented black SUV speeding toward a magazine shoot, Yibo scrolled through the headlines on his phone. Every few seconds, he'd glance sideways at Xiao Zhan, who sat silently beside him, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing patterns on the fogged-up window. The driver hummed along to a pop song, oblivious to the tension between the two stars in the backseat. "Do you regret it?" Yibo's voice finally broke the silence, low but steady. Zhan turned his head slowly. "Regret what?" "That you looked at me like that. On stage. In front of everyone." Xiao Zhan's lips curved into a small, almost defiant smile. "No." For a moment, the sound of the tires on the wet road was the only thing filling the car. Yibo felt the breath catch in his chest. He'd expected hesitation, maybe even embarrassment. But no wasn't just an answer, it was a declaration. By the time they reached the shoot, journalists were already outside, flashes popping like fireworks. Tan Songyun had arrived earlier, prepping outfits and fielding questions about the viral image with her usual grace. She greeted them at the entrance, but even she couldn't hide the twinkle in her eyes. "You two have broken the internet," she teased, slipping a bottle of water into Zhan's hand. "People are calling it the most romantic moment in fandom history." Yibo snorted lightly but said nothing. Zhan took a sip of water, pretending to be annoyed, but a faint blush betrayed him. During the shoot, the photographer, an experienced professional known for capturing emotions, deliberately placed them side by side for several frames. "Closer," he instructed. "No, closer than that." The two complied, but every accidental brush of their hands, every fleeting glance, carried electricity. At one point, Yibo whispered something that made Zhan's eyes widen in surprise, and the photographer caught the split second after, a look so tender it rivaled the original viral photo. Hours later, the trio escaped to a secluded hillside cafe overlooking the city. The evening sky had turned to a deep violet, dotted with early stars. The cafe owner, a longtime fan, quietly seated them on the balcony and promised privacy. Yibo leaned against the railing, staring at the horizon. "Do you ever think," he began, "that maybe we've been telling a story without meaning to?" Zhan looked up from his latte, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "All those times, on rooftops, backstage, in the rain," Yibo said quietly. "Every look. Every touch. Maybe this isn't the first time the world's seen what we're too afraid to say." Zhan's gaze softened, and he stood to join Yibo at the railing. For a moment, neither spoke. The city lights twinkled below like scattered diamonds. The breeze carried the faint hum of distant traffic and laughter. Songyun, sitting a few tables away pretending to scroll through her phone, couldn't help but watch. She knew better than to interrupt. Some moments belonged only to the two of them. The following day, the magazine released a behind-the-scenes video of the shoot. One frame in particular, a candid shot of Yibo gently brushing a stray hair from Zhan's forehead, exploded across social media. Fans began creating edits, pairing the original photo with this new image. One caption read, "First, the look. Now, the touch. What's next, a confession?" During rehearsal that night, the tension between them was almost unbearable. Every move seemed loaded with meaning. When Yibo adjusted Zhan's mic pack, his fingers lingered a fraction too long. When Zhan laughed at one of Yibo's jokes, the sound felt heavier, richer, as if layered with memories. Backstage, Yibo caught Zhan looking at him again, this time when he thought no one was watching. The look wasn't fleeting, it was deep, like a promise carved into stone. Yibo's heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to say something, anything, but words felt too small for the moment. As the tour progressed, fans started bringing prints of the viral photo to shows, holding them high like banners. Some even recreated the pose in fan art, sketching stars and galaxies inside Xiao Zhan's eyes. At one performance, a fan held up a sign that read, "The stare that stopped time." Afterward, in the dressing room, Zhan held the sign in his hands, tracing the letters with his fingertips. "They're making this bigger than it is," he murmured. But Yibo shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "No. They're just seeing what's been there all along." Zhan met his gaze then, steady, unwavering. And for the briefest moment, Yibo swore he saw entire futures reflected back at him. A week later, a charity gala brought them both to a glittering ballroom filled with chandeliers and polished marble. The crowd buzzed with excitement, whispering about the photo, about the rumors. As cameras flashed, Zhan stepped onto the red carpet first, looking every inch the superstar. When Yibo joined him, their eyes found each other instantly, and though they kept their expressions neutral for the cameras, that silent connection was unmistakable. Inside, under the dim glow of crystal lights, they found themselves at a table tucked into a corner. The gala carried on around them, a swirl of music and laughter, but for Yibo and Zhan, time slowed again. Zhan's hand rested on the table, fingers barely brushing Yibo's. Neither of them moved their hands away. Instead, they let the quiet intimacy settle between them like a secret vow. Songyun, across the room, caught sight of them and smiled knowingly. She'd seen that look before, on rooftops, on boats, in stolen moments between rehearsals. It was the look that had started everything. That night, Yibo walked Xiao Zhan to his car. The street outside the ballroom was nearly empty, the city quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. Before Zhan stepped inside, Yibo called his name. Zhan turned, his breath visible in the cool night air. Yibo took a step closer, then another. The world seemed to shrink until there was only the two of them beneath the streetlight's golden halo. "You should know," Yibo said quietly, "that I meant what I said earlier, about the photo. I'm not sorry the world saw it." Zhan's lips parted slightly, his heart thundering in his chest. He wanted to respond, to close the distance, but the weight of the moment stole his words. So instead, he gave Yibo the same look, the one that had shattered the internet, the one that had whispered truths he'd been too afraid to speak. Yibo's breath caught. And for a heartbeat, it felt like the whole city was holding its breath with him.